Before we get started this morning, I do have a couple of housekeeping items that I would like to cover quickly. Today's webinar will be recorded and it will be available on demand after the live session through a link on New York Sea Grant's website and YouTube channel, which will be provided to you via email following the webinar. We'd love to hear from you, and your active participation in this webinar is very important to us. You do have the opportunity, and I recommend any questions that you may have via the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. You may send them in during the presentations at any time. I will be collecting these and addressing them in the order that they were received, question and answer session. So you're given the option of who to send your questions to. Please select send to and host and presenter. That way only Eric and I can see these. So with all that being said, I am going to go ahead and get started. I am the first presenter for this morning's session, and I will be discussing with you how to start a watercraft inspection steward program. So thanks again for joining us today for the webinar is how to start a watercraft inspection steward program. My name is Brittany Rogers. I'm with New York Sea Grant. I started my career with New York Sea Grant as a launch steward a couple years ago, and I kind of moved my way up, and now I am the Watercraft Inspection Steward Program Leaders Trainer. So I provide assistance to other program leaders and their coordinators to kind of help get new programs started if they have questions or they're running into problems throughout their season. I'm a good resource for you guys to contact if you need help with anything. My email address is at the bottom of the screen. It's blr93@cornell.edu. If you have any questions at all, or you just have some advice that you're looking for, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as I can with that. So I'm going to start today by discussing some of the biggest concerns with aquatic invasive species and defining exactly what aquatic invasive species are. I'm going to move on to defining watercraft inspection and watercraft inspection programs, what they are and why they're so important. Then we'll move over to standardizing watercraft inspection programs and the New York State Watercraft Inspection Steward Program Handbook. I'll give you a quick history of that, and then we'll go ahead and give you guys some steps for starting a new program, as I know a lot of you guys are new or young and you're just looking for some extra help. So I do have a lot to cover today, and I hope everybody's ready. If you're taking notes, feel free, but remember these PDFs will be available online following the webinar, and the recording will be as well, so you don't have to get down everything. So if I move too fast, I'm sorry about that. New York State Invasive Species Task Force defines aquatic invasive species, or AIS as I will refer to them throughout this presentation, as aquatic organisms, whether they're plants, animals, or pathogens, that are not native to the aquatic ecosystem under consideration. Their introduction is likely to cause or already causes economic or environmental harm and harm to human health. There's four major reasons why we should be concerned with aquatic invasive species. Aquatic invasive species can outcompete and displace native species. A lot of us are seeing this today as their populations are growing. It's pretty devastating to see how much money actually has to go into the management, whether it's on a local, state, or federal level. As the aquatic invasive species populations are growing and spreading, so is the cost. Recreationally, the plants in the water, they cause those huge mats, which then makes it difficult for boaters or swimmers to get through. Fishermen are getting having a lot of issues with the water fleas, being a nuisance to them, getting caught up on their lines or other fishing gear. Zebra mussels have been around for a while. They cut the feet of swimmers, or they're just completely encrusting historic shipwrecks. So health-wise, AIS can also carry pathogens and parasites that are harmful, whether it's to native species or potentially to humans. An example of this would be zebra mussels and quagga mussels. They likely play an important role in transmitting type E botulism, which is a bacterial disease that causes die-off in fish and waterfowl. So there are things that we can do to limit the spread of AIS, which is why most of you are here today. Developing watercraft inspection programs to intercept the introduction of AIS, educating boaters on how they can help prevent the spread of AIS, and by inspecting boats and following Clean Drain Dry and Stop Aquatic Hitchhiker campaigns. So recreational boating is identified as a key pathway to the spread of aquatic invasive species across the Great Lakes Basin and inland water bodies. So with that being said, what is watercraft inspection? Watercraft inspection consists of visually inspecting all areas of boating and recreational equipment. Some examples are your boat, your trailer, scuba gear, anything that comes in contact with or holds water. Removing all visible plants, animals, and mud, and then draining water from all of those compartments and containers. So Steward demonstrated watercraft inspection is an effective way to inform voters about AIS issues. They help reduce the impact of aquatic invasive species on the waters, and it helps reduce them from spreading. And it empowers voters in general just to protect the natural resources that they love and that they enjoy and they want to be able to continue enjoying for the rest of their lives. So again, just reiterating what I just said, you're teaching voters how to look for aquatic hitchhikers through the demonstration of watercraft inspection. And you're just empowering them, you're giving them information about important laws that they're unaware of, and making sure that that they know what's going on. So watercraft inspection programs themselves are an outreach tool utilizing paid and or volunteer stewards to engage voters and teach them how to perform watercraft inspections. Oftentimes, voluntary watercraft inspections are common at launches. You are seeing regulations increasing across New York State, making it mandatory at some launches. To accomplish the objectives of the watercraft inspection programs, you're teaching voters how to look for AIS, informing them about laws, teaching them about identification, how they're being spread, prevention methods, and oftentimes they develop and distribute watercraft inspection educational materials. They collect data, they respond to questions that the public may have about AIS or the launches in general that they might not have had an opportunity to ask somebody before. So again, I know there's a lot of material on the slides. Just remember that this PowerPoint will be available online following this presentation. So just quickly, you're encouraging voters to adopt behaviors that are supporting clean, drain, dry practices and collecting data, which is very important for our natural resource educators across the state. Watercraft inspection and associated steward programs are critical components in protecting aquatic ecosystems and water quality by preventing and limiting the spread of aquatic invasive species among water bodies in New York State and neighboring states and provinces. We all share the same waters, so it's important for all of us to work together. By demonstrating proper watercraft inspection and sharing these educational messages during interactions with voters, the stewards are leading by example to increase voters' awareness about ways that they can help prevent the spread of AIS and protect our recreational waterways. Well-conducted demonstrations show voters that inspections can be quick, simple, and effective in managing AIS. So standardizing watercraft inspection is about achieving a greater level of consistency in protocols and standards that are employed by the steward programs across New York. This helps benefit the area both environmentally and economically. Again, I mentioned before, economically the cost to manage AIS once they're established is just increasing year by year, and environmentally you're seeing a lot of native plants being displaced because of these invasive species. So standardized watercraft inspection helps limit variation between the programs. It helps provide guidance to newly developed programs or young programs and just some startup support so they have somewhere to go. It also helps increase the effectiveness by ensuring that programs are using the best science and technology that is currently available. You know, everybody says it in a different way, but basically there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. If there's something that's already out there and being used, all programs across the state or across the country should be using those similar things because at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same goal. So standardizing helps with consistency among programs, promoting credibility with voters, and it just makes it easier for the public to recognize, understand, anticipate, and comply with watercraft inspection and prevention programs. especially with the new regulations out there, it's really good for the public to be familiar with the stewards and the steward programs and just kind of know how to do the watercraft inspection on their own so that when the new laws are coming into effect, they're not kind of being blindsided by it and confused as what they're supposed to be doing. So, what is New York Sea Grant's role exactly in watercraft inspection? We provide training assistance for steward programs, whether they're new, old, basically whatever it is. If they have questions or concerns, we're a great resource. We can also put you in contact with other partners that we may have or get you in contact with other programs across the country. We are one of the sponsors of the Watercraft Inspection Steward Program Leaders Workshop that is going to be held again in the spring. It was held last May, and it will be held again this May. So we had that in conjunction with NYSFOLA's, or New York State Federation of Lake Associations conference that they have every year. And also we're doing this webinar series. Throughout the winter, we will be working on tool or resource development. And then finally, what I'm going to talk about is New York State's Watercraft Inspection Steward Program Handbook. The handbook was published in 2014. There is a PDF available online for download if you are interested in it. If you haven't heard of it before, I actually would really love for you to email me and let me know, or if you do use it in your program, that'd be great if you could email me and let me know how you've used it in the past, how you plan to use it in the future. I'm really interested in seeing how far our efforts have gone with the handbook, and we'd like to really make sure that all the programs across New York State and neighboring states have the opportunity to use this, and hopefully it's helpful for everybody. We want this to be, the goal of this is to be a guide for new programs. We've collected recommendations from across the state and just an overall resource for coordinators and stewards as well. It was a collaborative effort, and funding was provided by New York State Environmental Protection Fund. The rest of my presentation today is going to be focused on Section 5 of the handbook. So the steps, depending on the individual program factors, the steps may occur simultaneously or they can occur in a different sequence. But the steps that I'm going to go through, it's 10 steps, and I'll get into a lot more detail about it. But it's just the main things, the main topics that you might find that are really important for your program and what you need to get started and get going or to become more standardized so that you're like other programs as well. So there are more than 7,600 freshwater lakes in New York State that have the potential for aquatic invasive species to spread into. The highest concern of this spread is through recreational boating. Being proactive with aquatic invasive species education, management, and implementing watercraft inspection can prevent the introduction and slow down the contamination. There are many reasons to start a new program in your area. Among them are protecting the water body from the threats of AIS, encouraging stewardship of New York's natural resources, developing and nurturing existing partnerships, and this is something that I find is very, very important, fostering good public relations for your organization and partners. So getting yourselves out there, getting your name out there, getting people to know who you are and what exactly you do. Again, the following steps that we're going to talk about today will be, or can be used as a guide by your program while you're developing your program or standardizing your current program. Okay, so step number 1. The program coordinator takes the lead on developing program components. They supervise the daily activity of the stewards. So even with a dedicated coordinator, developing an effective and efficient watercraft inspection program, it takes a lot of time, patience, and the ability to reach out to your partners. So step 1, identify a program leader. Step 2 is to develop and nurture your partnerships. Partnerships are vital in the development of each of New York State's watercraft inspection programs that are existing today. While starting your new program, consider seeking partners with expertise, whether it's local, regional, statewide, federal, on AIS issues, and make sure that your partners have varying geographic coverage areas. Some example of partners that you can reach out to and try to find are your PRISMs, state agencies, cooperative extension, lake associations, and there's just so many more. So step 3 is determining your program structure, whether you want your staffing to be paid or volunteer. There are some programs out there that rely solely on volunteers and some on paid staff only, and some are a combination of the two. When you're determining the structure of your program, make sure you're considering funding availability and resources, your coverage area, and the level of commitment of the program coordinator and your potential recruits. Be realistic about what you're looking for to get from your program, and every program is going to be different. Everyone's going to have a different goal at the end of the things that they want. At the end of the day, though, watercraft inspection is the main component. So there's typically more financial flexibility when you're designing a volunteer-based program. When you're using volunteers to implement your program, you will not have the steward salary costs as other programs, but consider allocating funds for supplies, travel, program or volunteer coordination. Allocating an estimate number of volunteer work hours is important as well, and it's also necessary in terms of liability insurance and injury protection. Be sure to check with your organization or your other partners to confirm that there's no required elements that have been overlooked. For planning purposes, it may be advisable to also calculate a per steward expense so that you know how much each steward will cost and how many stewards you can actually have. As you can see, there's a sample table on your screen right now for the budget. This can be modified to meet the specific needs and requirements of your program, your organization, or your partners. Some expenses are steward pay, steward supplies, program operating costs, and I guess that really includes like storage containers, training fees, distributional materials, technology upgrades. Say you want to get some tablets for your stewards to start doing data collection on the computer rather than all paper data. Section 6, page 10 of the New York State Watercraft Inspection Handbook is a great resource for this, for the budget. If you're interested also, following today's webinar, please email me and I can forward you a financial information checklist along with a funding resources document that was developed by New York State DEC for watercraft inspection steward programs. Again, don't forget to use the handbook, the New York State Watercraft Inspection Steward Program Handbook, to guide you while trying to build your budget. So now that you have a budget, you figured out how many stewards you are going to have, you need to determine what the steward duties are going to be. Some of the duties for watercraft inspections vary among the different programs, but again, the most consistent duty is going to be conducting watercraft inspections at boat launches. Some activities include visually checking the boats, demonstrating watercraft inspection to teach boaters how to conduct them on their own, collecting and recording standardized data, and providing AIS spread prevention tips to the boaters. Your program can be customized to also include other activities like developing new fact sheets, newspaper articles, running a blog, doing videos, monitoring for invasive species, developing educational programs. All of this really depends on your organization's mission and goals and the goals of your partners. Okay, so after that, you really want to determine how your stewards are going to be recognized. Your stewards have to be clearly identifiable to boaters. You want uniforms to help maintain professionalism and indicate to boaters and the public that the stewards are there in a professional capacity. Some programs incorporate the Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers logo on the uniforms. As you can see in the picture on the bottom left, there is a man standing by the water with a Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers shirt on. And as you can see, the shirts are red. So red is a consistent color, it's bright, it stands out from the surroundings that you're in, and that's what the Stop Aquatic Hitchhiker logo branding, that's the color of it, so it's consistent. Trying to be consistent across the board with all the steward programs will be a little bit difficult, but for the most part, your stewards can be more willing to talk with them, and that's really important. You want the public to be willing to meet with your stewards and talk with them freely. So yes, watercraft inspection is the main component, but there is really a lot beyond watercraft inspections, especially these steward programs. If you're hiring, whether they're high school or college-age students, you know, this position that they have could be a stepping stone for the stewards in a direction and a career path for them. So it could get them out in the field and get them to realize that they love education, they love talking to the public, they like what they're doing, or they could absolutely hate it. They can go through the whole season and determine, it helps determine if they're going in the right way. There's water chestnut hand pulls that stewards can participate in. As you see in the bottom left-hand side, there's a photo of a launch steward talking with an older gentleman and a photo of a launch steward talking with a group of kids. There's some bow fishermen who are out there, so it's the people that the audience that you're working with are of all different types, and there's so many different things that the stewards are doing, and you may not even realize it. As a volunteer, if you're a little bit older, as a volunteer and you're doing steward duties and watercraft inspection, you're getting out of the house, you're meeting new people, and you're talking about something that you're passionate about. The watercraft inspection steward programs also really help expand the public's knowledge of and familiarity of your program. So you're getting your program's name out there and kind of helping the public understand what you do. Okay, so the next step is to determine the coverage area and secure owner permission. This is really important because early in the planning process, you have to identify who owns and manages the launch sites where you're interested in having your stewards go. You need to reach out to the launch owners for requirements and liability issues and that you may need to address prior to having stewards there. There are some municipalities that do require you having written permission presented before their monthly board meetings and proof of insurance. Some managers require permits, so make sure that when you're planning your steward program or starting up your steward program, you're allowing time for these approvals to be granted. Sometimes they can take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks or even 8 weeks to get the permission request. If you look at your screen right now, there is a sample of a permission letter. I'll give you guys a quick minute to read this over, but this is in the handbook in Appendix D. So you guys can download this and use this when you are asking other launch owners or property owners to be allowed to have stewards at their location. Okay, so determining the coverage schedule area. So your funding levels may limit the number of paid staff that you have out in the field, and it is not typically possible to have stewards at every launch that's out there. We do recommend that your watercraft inspection efforts are focused at the higher traffic launches or the launch that's in your area. Prior to the onset of the boating season, learn about the usage patterns of the launches where your stewards could be or will be at. You can do this by physically visiting the launches, talking to the property owners or the property operators for their usage data. You have to find out who's actually out there working and playing. Talk to the public, talk to managers, and once you have an idea about the launch usage, that's when you can better plan your coverage schedule. You want to make sure that you're targeting the busiest times. Typically, the launches are busiest on the weekends and holidays. A lot of launches experience different ways of activity depending on the purpose of launch use. So, for example, fishermen are usually out really early in the morning. Families that are going out for the day go out sometime around lunch or after lunchtime, and you're getting people to come back in late afternoon. There's tournaments that are out there that are busy from 5 a.m. until 5 p.m. So make sure you really do work with the property owners and stay aware of special events that they have going on to make sure that you're best identifying the role of your stewards during special events. So some property owners don't want stewards there at all while there are tournaments, like fishing tournaments. Others actually work with the tournament coordinators and build the inspections into the tournament rules. It's a little bit more difficult when you're scheduling volunteers since they're not paid for their service, but make sure that you something that you consider when scheduling your volunteers is being clear about what you're looking for and flexible within your program. So the hours that you need covered and your willingness to change your schedule around on an as-needed basis. It's going to make your life a lot easier, and your volunteers will be a lot happier to help you out. So the next step that you have everything figured out, so now you want to develop your steward training program. The goal of your training is to provide stewards, whether they are paid or volunteer, with the tools and resources to help them confidently and accurately complete their duties. Training for paid and volunteered staff is highly recommended. The goal of training is, again, to provide them with the tools and information that they need. The length of your training varies among each program, so some training is done in the classroom and others are done in the field. This can be anywhere from one-day training just at the beginning of the season, at the end of the season, throughout the whole season. Some components that most organizations include is an orientation on the organization, introduction to the region, AIS in the region, data collection protocol, which we will be talking about later, voter engagement, and different interpretation techniques to get them out there and really getting people's attention. You may also require additional training throughout the season. So data collection is a vital part of watercraft inspection. Analysis of watercraft inspection data helps natural resource managers in AIS management help leverage funds and continue and grow steward programs. It's really important that you clearly define what, how, and when your stewards will be collecting data. New York State watercraft inspection programs have adopted a standardized set of data, which can be found in Section 6, pages 16 through 18 of the handbook. It's really important for coordinators or leaders to review data as it's collected because it helps identify any shortcomings in the steward's data collection. You can provide appropriate training or support before a problem escalates. In the absence of weekly data checks, data entry and quality review can become difficult to manage, so you want to catch the problem before it becomes too big to resolve. Some programs collect it weekly or monthly, some collect it daily and check it over. Other programs have customized their data collection based on the needs of local issues and funding sources. I'm not going to go too far into depth with all of this because the next presentation by Eric, he'll be covering some of this later on. Okay, so something else to consider while training your stewards is for aquatic organism identification and specimen collection protocol. You want to provide training on identifying species that should include AIS and native lookalikes. Often a local PRISM member or Cornell Cooperative Extension can provide or even recommend a trainer for you for this purpose. Using the specimen that you have collected, there is a protocol in Section 5, page 7 of the handbook that helps it so that you can send your collection to an expert for confirmation or even correction of the species identification. So the program coordinator is a great resource. The potential partners can confirm or correct, and again, your PRISMs, your Cornell Cooperative Extensions, nearby universities, they can all help identify species that have been found. So be sure that your stewards are following a clearly defined specimen collection protocol to follow if they do come across an unidentifiable species that should be sent for identification. Determine the watch species for your program, assess your steward's identification skills throughout the season, and in Section 6, page 14 of the handbook, there is a detailed description of how to collect the specimen. Again, you don't have to use this exactly, but why reinvent the wheel if it's already out there? New York's existing steward programs do have some type of quality assurance, quality control protocol. So for the purpose of defining roles and responsibilities of partners administering the program and for your paid or volunteer stewards. So I'm going to refer to the quality assurance, quality control as a QA/QC plan. So the work, it ensures that the work is being completed by stewards consistently each year and between all of the years. It helps maintain credibility and consistency in data collection protocol, and it's recommended that you build a QA/QC criteria for your activities, particularly if there's multiple partners or organizations overseeing the program. Some items to consider including in your QA/QC are responsibilities of your program coordinator, the stewards, and your partners. reporting requirements and data collection protocol, entry protocol. Many programs have separate QA/QC plan documents. Others just include it in their training materials. If your program includes other activities in addition to watercraft inspection, I would consider developing a QA/QC plan for the entire program. If you are interested in any of this information, please feel free to email me and I can provide you with more. I can give you a sample of the QA/QC that New York Sea used to have when we had stewards, and I can give you more information, or if you think that you should include things or you just have questions about wording, again, feel free to email me and I can help you to the best of my ability with that. So the next step is to recruit stewards and hire your stewards, or to get your volunteers on board and get the ball rolling. So to recruit your stewards, you want to learn and apply the advertisement, recruitment, and hiring processes that the human resource department of your organization has, or if you don't have a human resource department, then you want to try to collaborate with your program partners and funders and figure out how you want to go about this. Some potential recruitment pools, for example, would be Lake Association newsletters and websites, local schools, different universities, and clubs. So Cornell Cooperative Extension has many clubs. There's also gardening clubs out there. There's scouts like Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, 4-H, Rotary clubs. There's so many more. Your steward program can also often count as community service for some schools and some groups interested in placing students or members in your program. That's a really great resource. When you're recruiting for stewards, though, be clear about the required application documents that you're looking for. Make sure you establish an application date and time that allows you to interview, hire, and train your stewards before you want them active at the launch sites. And in your job announcement, be really clear of what you're looking for. Most programs do have an internal hiring process based on HR policies, but again, if your organization doesn't have a human resource department, in general, when you're conducting interviews, it's best to include somebody from another party. So one of your partners to participate in the interview process is a really good idea. You want to remove as many variables that you have in your process as possible, just to be sure that you're being fair and providing the candidates with an equal process. You want to use a standard set of interview questions which help frame and focus your evaluation. And likewise, you want a standard set of questions to check with references if you're looking at references. So when you're considering candidates, remember that these stewards will be directly representing your organization and your organization's partners. They'll also be indirectly representing all watercraft inspection programs across New York State. So your evaluation alone will identify the most desirable candidates, but you want to keep the bigger picture in mind as well. Once you're prepared to offer your positions, you want to use a standard language, some kind of letter, email, or something, and using the same thing with each of the candidates. Not all offers will be accepted, so you want to make sure that you're also allocating time to, in the recruitment process, to continue looking and reaching in deeper into your applicant pool if something doesn't work out. Okay. So the next step would be to implement your training protocol. So prior to your steward starting, you want to work with the launch owners and identify the best location for your stewards to be setting up their inspection stations. In general, you want them to be located in an area close to the launch but far enough away so they don't cause congestion or cause any problems or cause any hazards. It's usually preferred that they are that boats and trailers are being inspected and draining and removing aquatic invasive species all in one spot. So this will help prevent runoff and it'll stop things from returning back into the water or entering the water if they just came into the launch area. To limit unnecessary movement and to enhance inspection and data collection efficiency, again, you want to be far enough away from the launch that you're not causing congestion or any problems. every region has their own concerns for AIS and their own watch species, but to promote consistency across the state, many of the programs offer the Clean Boats, Clean Waters RACS card, as you can see on your screen right now. This is also in Section 6, page 12 of the handbook. The boaters are given this at the end of each inspection, along with other materials if they're interested. There are links to other additional resources if you're interested in Section 7 of the handbook. So again, you want to provide the as many educational materials as you can to the public. So if they come across a new species that they haven't seen before and they're not familiar with it, and you have, say, for instance, this RAC card, it's great to give them that, give them a chance to read up on and learn more about what they're doing. So, okay, in summary, again, use this handbook as a guide, standardize your program when possible, and call on your partners or other organizations for guidance and topical expertise as needed. Okay, so that is the conclusion of my presentation today. If anybody has any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat box, or if you would like to go ahead and email me privately, you can do that as well. Okay, so the Clean Boat, Clean Water, there is a PDF available online for that RACS card. So that question, if you would like to email me for these materials, or if you get online and use the handbook, there are links in the Section 7 of the handbook to give out the PDF so that you can download and print the educational material. If anybody has any further questions, please feel free to email me or continue to send me messages in the chat box, and I'll get back to everybody as I can. All right, so I just want to introduce Eric really quickly. Our second presenter is currently serving as the interim dean of the School of Commercial, Applied, and Liberal Arts at Paul Smith College. He has served as a environmental studies and program director for the environmental studies, liberal arts, and recreation. He is also the director of the Adirondack Watershed Institute Stewardship Program, which works to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species on waterways across the Adirondack region. I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball to him, and he can get started.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is a new format for me, so you're going to have to bear with me as I deal with this being so far away from everyone, but I'll do my best. So good morning and welcome. You see a nice sunny picture here of Lake Flower in Saranac Lake. This is where we spend most of our time up in the interior of the Adirondacks. I was asked today to tell you, to share with you some information about why gathering data is so important for the steward programs, for these boat inspection programs, as they're getting started, but it becomes even more important year by year as the data accumulates. This image you can see is an image from before our transition to completely digital data collection. You see Andrew here using a clipboard. So this is hopefully the last time you'll see a clipboard associated with stewards. Paper was a great way to start, but we're beyond that now and moving toward sharing data more efficiently and effectively. So let's see, the next slide, that's me. Okay, so actually there's a human here. Good morning. And we're moving on to why we're doing this in the first place. Good question. Why should we collect all these numbers? Why not just deliver the product, clean the boats, educate the public, and leave it at that? Well, many reasons why you need data. One reason is just to know where the stewards are needed in the first place. What are the traffic levels of the different boat launches? Are there different types of watercraft you will be encountering? You don't know any of this until you are there for a season and you gather hard numbers. Many times we have guesses about which waterways and boat launches are most busy, but those guesses sometimes are borne out, but sometimes they are not in terms of the reality of how the public is using boat launches. We're also trying to weigh where to put limited resources. Do we put boat inspectors at, boat launch X or boat launch Y? Which one's busier? Well, until you really are there day by day gathering the data, you don't know. Now, another point is accountability. Often we had about 70 employees last summer. So the data becomes a way to track when the steward was there, were they on duty? We've had to follow this up numerous times when there's disputes about whether a steward is there or not. So this is helpful. Also, if there are key finds, if somebody says they found, let's say, something remarkable like hydrilla, we can drill down on that particular line of data, double check that to confirm what are the conditions around this to gather the entire signature of that incident. Okay. I think this is just as important. Does the program make a difference? Your numbers measure your impact. The saves or the number of times that you stop an invasive species from either entering or leaving a waterway, those are important numbers for all of us, for the resource managers, but also for the funding sources. We can also measure to some extent whether the visitors have changed their behavior as a result of boat inspector education. So we can ask similar questions over time and track those changes in terms of compliance, self-reported compliance by the visitor. And then justification, are we spending money well? How much does it cost per inspection, per save, per week? These are sometimes deceiving metrics because you actually want to have fewer saves over time, so the cost per save goes up. But the cost per inspection could be a fairly standard metric. Okay, so once you get the data, then you start getting a picture of the kind of use pressures that are faced by individual waterways. We're at something like 50 different waterways across the Adirondack region. Each one of them is unique. So I'm just focusing here on Cranberry Lake. These are numbers from 2014. You can see the kinds of watercraft. We assume at Cranberry Lake it's mostly motorboats. The data shows that it is so. There's quite a few personal watercrafts. The non-motorized traffic is a lot less at the state boat launch. Okay, so this is good information, characterizes the kind of pressure. The number of AIS intercepted, there was only 10 in 2014. The boats were relatively clean. Only 3% of boats at Cranberry Lake were encountered with any kind of organism. So that's below our average. So Cranberry Lake is receiving pressure, but comparatively less than a lot of what the other lakes were dealing with. So again, we can add on to that data. Total number of people. What kind of organisms are we finding, from native all the way through to invasive? You can see there are numbers for each one. And then we have the smoking gun in the lower part of the slide here. When you do find an invasive species, you can drill down on that data and find, because you ask what was the last waterway that you visited, you can find what those connections were. So the curly leaf pondweed twice came from St. Lawrence River in 2014, and one time there was no previous waterway, so that's kind of mysterious. This helps us confirm what we suspect in terms of waterways impacting each other. So that's just Cranberry Lake. And this slide shows the behavior piece. So we ask our visitors, what AIS spread prevention measures have you taken before coming to this boat launch today? And we ask that very carefully to try to get the same kind of signal each year. So about just under half in 2014 said they did something, and what they did, from inspecting their boats all the way to drying and emptying their live wells. These are the different behaviors that they said they did. And we can track that over time. In the lower right, you can see the spread prevention measures changes over time. So I see there's an inconsistency between 45 and 73% there. So I'll have to check that. So the other thing that it can tell us is we can get tables about showing where the visitors were coming previously before they launched in our targeted waterway, and it can be a very long list of a very diverse list of previously visited waterways, but there are patterns there too. So the pattern that you should notice is in the top two responses for Cranberry Lake. It was either Cranberry Lake or no other place, and that is consistent across all of our waterways. Something like 75 or 80% of the watercraft were either nowhere in the previous 2 weeks, or they were in the same lake. So that's fairly common, mostly New York State, et cetera. So this is just one lake. This helps us see the interconnected network. This is a GIS treatment of that data. showing that the signals of watercraft coming into Cranberry Lake are strongest from Lake Ontario, Lake Bonaparte, and St. Lawrence River. This helps us understand how Cranberry Lake is receiving pressure from external sources that are of concern. And now we start layering on that data with other waterways that are in our network, and we start seeing the patterns emerge. Lake Ontario, again, is a key input into Racket Lake. Now the use pattern for Racket Lake shifts more toward the south, toward the Mohawk River and Finger Lake region. So this is useful information to help us understand the spatial interrelationship. So if we do this for all of our lakes, we can start developing a model of how what the use pressures are in terms of inbound traffic between lakes in our entire area. We identified tentatively 3 sub-networks along the Northway and the High Peaks and the Fulton Chain. And this helps us understand where we could potentially cut off some of those interconnections or intercept watercraft that are moving from some of these spread hubs within our entire region. So we modified that model for 2014. The more data we collect, the more complex the model becomes. This is I'm sure you'd like to study this at great length, this complicated graphic here. And we're going to see that for 2015, the model is comparatively similar, but with some additional refinements. But we do see that our general model bears out year after year, that the spread hubs are Great Sacandaga Lake, Saratoga Lake, Lake Champlain, Chateauguay, Lake Placid. So these are nodes for user traffic, user interaction. One of our GIS employees was able to take that inbound traffic analysis and overlay it on the highways. So this is a useful presentation of the data, so we can see where along the routes we might place roadside assets, roadside boat checks. And this is very helpful to be able to do this as we're planning for regional spread prevention, which is a good transition to what we did this past summer, which was piloting our Adirondack Park-wide AIS spread prevention program. So this was partly funded by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, partly funded by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and then other Lake Champlain Basin program, and then private associations as well. So you can see we had a network of both stewards and decontamination facilities across the park. We cooperated with Lake George, we cooperated with the Lake Champlain Basin programs so that we had data sharing between all of our programs. So this is, I think, where a lot of regions across the state hope to get some kind of system like this. Everyone's working together, sharing data, and trying to reduce the threats to adjacent lakes through local activity. Okay, so what kinds of information? I think I already alluded to this. There are, if the association or the authority can do nothing else, we do want them to ask where the boat had been in the previous 2 weeks. Also the boat type and the date and time of the interaction. So the last two, the boat type and the date and time, are observable data points. The first one, where was your boat in the previous 2 weeks, obviously requires a human to ask that question or a register service of some kind. So if the boat inspector program is able to do the second priority, more data, we certainly encourage that. What kind of organism did you detect on the watercraft? Was it native? Was it invasive? Was the watercraft launching or retrieving? Our employees ask what spread prevention measures the visitor took before arriving. And inspector name is helpful to go back, and the data manager can go back and revisit the interaction with the employee to make sure that all the information was accurate, so we don't have false positives or false negatives. So as far as collecting the data, why we moved from paper to a digital format, basically to try to reduce human error. We have thousands, tens of thousands of lines of data generated each summer with 70 employees. So we want to make sure that it's standardized. We're using a proprietary software package. It's actually fairly inexpensive from a company that I can share with you. We've developed this survey that is easy to share. We're sharing it with Schroon Lake and Lake Champlain Basin Program and other steward programs in the Adirondacks, and happy to share this with you. So this just allows us to collect data the same way each time. Much easier to quality control it at the end and actually during the summer. We use an iPad mini. We had used an iPad 2, which is a larger format. The iPad mini works well. But, you know, Android could work, cell phones could work. The problem with cell phones is that the batteries typically don't last all day. iPad mini has a more robust battery so that it can work all day. Easier to see too. Okay, so this is again, a slide about the paper. There's the clipboard. Andrew's got the clipboard in front of him. So spelling is an issue with a database. You can eliminate most of the spelling errors, but yet there are still hundreds more that the stewards will have to enter by hand because we can't have a drop-down menu that is 500 legs long. The nice thing about this Excel format is that a data manager can check weekly and follow up with the field staff, and they should do this on a weekly basis because the field staff, their memory will fade over time as they interact with thousands of users over the summer. So the end result is that you're going to have a database potentially that looks like this. This was our database from 2014. And it's a lot of data. Look how many lines there are, 25,000 lines here. And this wasn't even the end of the data. And you can see the fields, the columns continue to go off the side of the page. They're probably 40 or 50. Now we're up to around 60 different fields of data that we're capturing. So we slide this over. You can see there's all this wonderfully tabulated data that you can manipulate and look at via pivot table and other data manipulation techniques to get very helpful conclusions and information. So all of that boils down to something like this. So in 2014, you're able to scan across and see how your different boat launches are similar and different in terms of the use pressure that they receive, how dirty or how clean the boats are that are found using these waterways, whether the boats are dirtier upon entering or leaving. So essentially, are they importing or exporting invasive species? And basically a comparative between the waterways. And the take-home message is that it's much more diverse than you think. That there are different risk levels associated with each waterway, and so that leads you to think that you may want to approach the boat inspection protocol differently at each waterway, which is true. Okay, so if you look at Table 8 in the right-hand side, you'll see that somewhere around 44 plus 28, 75% or so of watercraft in 2014 essentially presented very little or no risk when launching, because at least in our waterways, because they'd either been nowhere in the preceding 2 weeks or they've been at the same lake. So that's kind of good news and bad news. The good news is that you might think that 75% of the boats present no risk. Hooray! The bad news is that AIS are still spreading despite this fairly low presenting risk. So the tail ends of the curves in terms of percentages are still spreading AIS, at an alarmingly fast rate. So the lower left, you can see a format. It's hard to see; it's small. But for what we produce for each of our lakes, essentially it's a digest. It's about 2 or 3 pages long. So at a glance, you can kind of get a profile of the kinds of use pressure that were encountered at each of these waterways every year. So that's a handy and a concise way of sharing this information with stakeholders. I'm almost done. I'm going too quickly. So just to review, the data points that we urge all of our participants and all of our people to collaborate with us to collect: previously visited waterway, the type of watercraft, and obviously the number of boats that you're seeing at each waterway, and the date and time stamp. Second priority would be the organism type, is it launching or retrieving, and what spread measures the visitor took before arriving, and the inspector's name. So we obviously collect far more than that, but we ask our collaborators to do at least this, and if they can do everything we do, great. Maybe they're collecting things that we don't collect. Actually, that's true. Some of the boat inspector programs are asking questions that are specific to their communities and to their regions. For instance, what is the purpose of your visit to the lake today? You know, a lot of associations want to know that. Is it recreational? Is it fishing tournaments? Is it water skiing? So you know, this is an opportunity to gather other kinds of data as well. Okay, so believe it or not, through the bulk of my presentation, if folks would like me to back up and go to specific slides and explain those to a greater extent, I'm willing to do that.
Hi, Eric.
Yes.
Okay, I do have a couple questions for you. Again, everybody, if you do have questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to go ahead and put them into the chat box, and we will answer them to the best of our ability.
All right.
So the first question is, what's that? Oh,
go ahead.
Okay. The first question is, how long does the typical boater inspection or interaction take, and how have they been received by boaters?
Okay, that's a great question. So typical is a really interesting question. As you can see, we're all over the Adirondack Park from Saratoga Lake, and some of our stewards are on Sacandaga Lake, which is also quite busy, to some of these interior waterways that are a lot quieter, you know, a lot fewer visitors and kind of quieter conditions. So in the interior waterways, sometimes these interactions can go on for 15 minutes, and these are wonderful interactions that the stewards can have to really educate the public about the program and about the importance of water quality. At the busier waterways, Saratoga's, Great Sacandaga, Lake Champlain, Lake George, they're moving through very quickly, so it can be as short as 30 seconds. If the visitor is a routine visitor, sometimes it's 1 second, and they say, I was in, you know, the last visited water body, Lake Placid, you know, and then they just move through, and the steward has to do a quick inspection as best they can. So this whole protocol and sort of standard of care is changing. We've been, obviously there's much more attention on this past year, and the standard of care is increasing. So we're approaching what Lake George does, although we'll never get to what Lake George does. Lake George has a mandatory program, so by statute they're required to stop every watercraft for a more thorough and time-consuming, but probably more effective inspection process. We are still voluntary at this point, so you know, we're doing our best to make this a process that is educational, pleasant, doesn't take inordinate amounts of time for the visitor. So it's a balance, and so I would say most of the interactions are 3 minutes. The conversational ones are 15 minutes. The routine visitors that come every day or have seen a steward, those can be 20 seconds to, you know, a few seconds.
Okay, great, thanks. So the next question is, how effective in reducing the spread of AIS are watercraft inspection programs? Have you done any studies to prove the effectiveness? And this one user said that they have only found the one study in literature, which is by Roethlisberger back in 2010.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be the study that keeps coming up over and over again. The answer to that is essentially looking at our data over time. We've been doing this for about 15 or 16 years, and our percentages in terms of the number of watercraft that we detect organisms on and remove organisms from are very consistent. About 10% of the watercraft have organisms. We're removing everything from mud to grass to twigs to spider webs, and about 3%, 2 to 3% are carrying AIS. These are visible AIS, of course, not counting the microscopic veligers and spiny water flea eggs and things like that, the resting egg cases. So as far as research, this is a form of data collection that we're doing that at least is hard numbers. We have not replicated the Roethlisberger study, which involved intensive boat washing and looking at the wastewater that comes off and really quantifying that. We haven't done that under those laboratory conditions. So as far as I know, no one else has either. But so essentially it's inferred impact and counting the number of saves, but also the progress of AIS into our waterways has been not overwhelmingly fast in the last 15 years, although there have been increases in variable leaf milfoil and as we're seeing Asian clam. So, but we have not done a science-based study of efficacy of hand removal. Hand removal, about 80% according to the Roethlisberger paper, and high pressure hot water, much higher, somewhere in the, I think it's in the high 80s or 90%, something like that.
Okay, great, thanks. So there are still quite a few questions coming in. I hope you're ready for the next one. So somebody asked about enforcement. So if or when a boater refuses inspection or has plant and material on their boat or trailer, what do your voluntary stewards do?
Okay, so yeah, so this past year they would be in violation of the DEC and OPRHP transport, regulations. So we inform the user that they are in violation, and that by complying, by cleaning their watercraft, they are potentially saving themselves from a fine and from a ticket. We instruct our employees so that takes care of far and away most of the violations. People are willing to comply once they realize that it's a violation of state regulation. The once in a while when we get people who refuse to comply, our stewards are allowed to and encouraged to make the phone call to the DEC to alert the dispatch that there has been somebody who is possibly in violation of the transport ban. That doesn't happen very often. I don't have the anecdotal numbers of how often our stewards call people in. I think it's very, very infrequently. But that's essentially the recourse that we've been told to do. The rangers and the conservation officers encourage us to let them know when there is an obvious violation, and they can follow up on it. But of course, the ability to find that person and track them down is difficult.
Okay, great. So there's 3 more questions that we will cover today. Well, 2 of them are kind of together. The first part of it is there are programs that have discussed the cost of digitalizing their program, but they're curious to know what it would cost to join your system, both upfront and then annually. And also there was a question about what exactly is the data application that you use?
Okay. Well, I guess I'm from a private college, so I don't have to worry about this stuff. So if you go to the company that we're using is called Snap Surveys, and let's see, you're probably seeing my desktop, so that'll come up. So snapsurveys.com. Yep. And it costs us about somewhere around $4,000 or $5,000 a year. And we're just we're absorbing, I can't say we're going to do this for everybody, but for some of the really tiny lake associations around us, for instance, Schroon Lake, they don't have a lot of money, so we just sort of roll theirs into ours. But Lake Champlain Basin Program is partnering with us on this system, so we all can kind of collect data the same way. And they just have to pay for the site licenses, and that's somewhere around, I don't know, $500, $1,000, something like that. for the number of iPads they have in use. You know, we have like 70 iPads in use. Lake Champlain Basin program might have 10. So you have to pay for the total number of surveys used. So site licenses plus also the number of surveys filed. So we had somewhere around 45,000 surveys filled out this past year. You probably, individual associations, you might have 10,000. So it would be, I would guess, between $1,000 and $2,000.
Okay, great. So I did have one more question come in for you quickly. How did you decide what days of the week and which hours to cover your boat launches? And this will be the last question.
Oh boy, that's a good one. Well, some of it is, you know, you want to cover every place all the time, right? But you can't. And so what we've done is accepted that we're not going to have hermetically sealed boat launches, and we're going to basically try to capture the bulk of use, and knowing that there are going to be fishermen that are coming, you know, early morning, late at night, that we're not going to catch. So we've done a 7 to 4 shift, which works well for our employees and also the use levels. Some of the waterways like Saratoga and Sacandagas that have a lot of use toward the end of the day, between 4 and 8, we will do a shift and a half, essentially another half shift, or we'll push it later into the afternoon and do a 10-hour shift. So we're doing our best to stretch our employees as far as is reasonable, emphasizing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you know, having longer days on those days. When you're at a state campground, we find that there's a lot of turnover on Sundays, and people are leaving on Sundays, but it's mostly Sunday mornings. They're arriving Friday afternoons and leaving Sunday mornings. But definitely prioritizing the weekends makes the most sense. We found that that's when the use levels are highest. You can analyze the data very easily to look at it, use levels by day and by day of the week. So you know, that's what we're finding is that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you want to have as long as possible, you know, daylight hours as much as you can. We're not able to do that though because of the limits of our funding.
Great. So if you have time, do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. So the question comes from Roy. He said, do you know if the neighboring Canadian provinces like Ontario or Quebec have invasive species programs or watercraft inspection programs? Has there been any info exchange between New York and these provinces?
Yeah, not so much interactivity or info exchange yet. It's been mostly with the other states. Vermont especially has been our closest collaborator. I would suspect that there's some activity up there, and unfortunately I don't know. I think I would refer that question to the Sea Grant and to our APIP, our local PRISM, or the St. Lawrence PRISM. Unfortunately, I'm focused so much on keeping this ship running within the Adirondacks that I haven't been aware of what's going on in Quebec and Ontario, and I should, but I don't know.
That's okay. I was going to say, actually, with this webinar, I do know that there have been a few people from Canada that have called in, emailed in, and that have had interest in it. So I'm not sure the depth of how far they are with watercraft inspection programs or their involvement. But I do know that there is interest. So it's a good question. So it's something that we can definitely look further into.
Well, it's true that we're finding visitors from the provinces. Most of our visitors, the vast majority, are from within New England and the States, but we are seeing some cross-border activity.
Great. Thanks, Eric, for answering so many questions. There are still some other questions that are coming in. We can save those, and for those of you who did ask a question that has not been answered, we can definitely address those through email afterwards. Again, I just wanted to thank you, Eric, for presenting with us today on standardized watercraft inspection data collection. If anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to contact me at ELR93@cornell.edu. And then Eric's email is eholmlund@paulsmith.edu. You will be receiving a follow-up email with a link to view the recording of today's webinar, and I'll also be attaching a link for an evaluation asking for feedback on the session. Everybody's insights are really important with this, and it helps us shape our future events like this if we're going to continue doing it or if we're going to change things up. There were some technical difficulties that we faced this week with posting last week's presentation. We're hoping to have those fixed by the end of this week or next week. So hopefully everything will get uploaded online as soon as possible. And again, on behalf of New York Sea Grant and the Watercraft Inspection Steward Program planning team and Eric today, thank you everybody for joining us. We hope that you guys found information and dialogue valuable in supporting your work. Next week, we do have multiple different presenters coming from programs around New York State. They'll be giving a quick presentation about their program and some kind of giving you some insight on what they do. There will be 4 presenters, and then at the end, we're going to kind of open up the board for about 30 minutes for question and answer and just kind of picking the brains of those who are already leading programs and just different kinds of programs, how they work, whether you have 2 or 3 stewards out at Canisius Lake or, for example, Eric's program who has multiple stewards all the way around at Rondex. So again, that's next Thursday. I think it's November 12th at 9 a.m. until 10:30 a.m. And make sure you register for that. That way you can get the WebEx link. And for everybody else, have a great day. Thanks again for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.